get down to business. So as promised, today we're going to learn how to test React applications, how to test your components in a few different ways. Let me make sure that I share my screen. Also, if at any point you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand here. Let's use the raise hand button that you have in the participants tab. Also, you can drop your questions in the chat, and I'll ask Winter and JR to please monitor the chat and let me know in case I'm unable to catch any questions that come up there. Please just bubble those up. Yeah, so to ask a question, raise your hand with the raise hand button, and or leave a question in the chat here on Zoom, and we'll be monitoring that. Cool. So if we go to Canvas, I uploaded, I sent the lesson link on the class chat channel. I also put it on Canvas. So if you go to Canvas for the event and make sure you refresh if you're already on Canvas, it should be there. Actually, I think let's go there. Let's load this from here. Cool.
Alejo, do you recommend us to follow, to code along, or just?
I built in some exercises that I'm going to give you some time to code. I would say I'll prefer you pay attention because there's going to be a lot of moving parts. So maybe just pay attention, ask questions about what doesn't make sense, rather than try to follow. And I'm going to give you some time to try some exercises. But that's a good question.
Okay. Thank you.
Cool. So objectives are be able to integrate testing into any of your React apps going forward. Ideally, you will start to think about it for your capstone project. Understand how to test simple individual React components and how to test more complex React components, as we're going to see. And we're briefly going to see how to test a React component using something called a snapshot. But that snapshot, the name is a little bit misleading. You would think that it's a screenshot of your app, but it's not. It's just that the component gets printed like in HTML, and you just check if the printed HTML is the same that you expect. We're going to see a little bit of that. Cool. So this is, we're going to be using a library called the testing library, or the React testing library more specifically. One of their guiding principles is this phrase that I put here at the top. The more your tests resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. And this is going to be a theme throughout. We want to test our code as close as possible to what the user would do once they have our application, to prevent, or in other words, we want our app to work for our users, and we don't gain anything by testing individual implementation details that are not perceived by the user. Cool. So we're going to use, as I said, the testing library. I left links all across the board for you to explore further. This is the testing library that we're going to use. Now, the testing library has a few projects under its wings. And actually, when I was doing this, I understood why they picked the octopus as their logo. And it's because they have a few other sort of branches and arms. So they have the React testing library, the Vue testing library, the native testing language library, and others. They have a bunch of them. Especially the native testing library might be for the group that's implementing React Native. I haven't looked at it, but you should want to look at it. So the testing library project has a bunch of projects under it. This is to, of course, test React apps, Vue apps, etc. Cool. So the reason why we want to test our components as close as possible to the way in which a user will use our app is so that we test for functionality and not for implementation. Ultimately, the value that our apps deliver is to the user. The user doesn't care about how you sorted the array, for instance, or how you sorted a list of products. They just care if you're able to sort them by price or by name. So it doesn't matter what kind of sort you use specifically. And that's something that the React testing library allows to do. The React testing library enables us to test components for functionality and not for implementation. For instance, this is an example. If we have our component that is written in a class and we write our unit test with the React testing library, let's say this is a form to sign up, your sign up form, for instance. That's used with a class, or if it's written as a class, or if it's written as a function. The user doesn't care about that. The user doesn't care if you're using state or if you're using hooks to manage the state. This is something that we're not going to get to see directly, but this is an example use case where if you write your test well, following that guiding principle of testing as close to the user as possible, you will be able to refactor your components from class to hooks, and your test should still be passing, and your users should still be happy, for instance. Cool. I wanted us to take a look at this video as a primer. That explains a little bit more about what the React testing library is. Let me share my audio so that you can hear the guy talking. Can you hear it well? Is the volume okay?
That's good. Hey, what's up? This is Scott Tolinsky with Level Up Tutorials. What is Wednesday video? We're going to be talking all about what is React Testing Library, which, I mean, its name is pretty obvious what it does, but let's talk a little bit about why it's different and how it stands out within the testing crowd of things. So React Testing Library was created by Kent C. Dodds, and as you can see at Kent C. Dodds React Testing Library on GitHub, I'll make this link available in the description. You can see it's a simple, complete React DOM testing utilities that encourage good testing practices, and this application lives up to its namesake. It does exactly all of that, and this is my new favorite testing library. In fact, I just completed a series on React testing using React Testing Library, and not only that, but all of my tests for Level Up tutorials are written in React Testing Library. So needless to say, I have a lot of experience with it at this point, and I really, really like this library. So let's talk about what it does and what it is exactly, because how do you use it? What is it used with? And this isn't going to be a tutorial or anything, but what it is essentially a way to test your React code. And by test, I mean render and evaluate and make sure that the right things are showing up. So does this replace something like Jest? No, it does not replace Jest. It works with Jest, and it works with Mocha. It replaces something like Enzyme. Now, Enzyme was another React testing library created by Airbnb that allowed to render your React components and check all sorts of stuff. However, with Enzyme, there's so many options, so many things to do with it. It could encourage some bad testing practices, and it actually was a bit of an effort to even use the right sort of practices based on all of the training that's out there and stuff like that for Enzyme. So React testing library gives you the stuff to work with DOM nodes specifically, where Enzyme was a lot about about working with React components and checking things like props and checking state and stuff like that. React testing library is all about what is output on the DOM, like what is the DOM at this time, and you can use individual actual DOM nodes and interact with them like JavaScript, so you can do things that you would normally do with JavaScript, but with essentially the output of a React component. Now, there's some really, really cool stuff in this. For the most part, this library, I found it just gives you everything that you need to test any sort of components. It gives you a render, a cleanup, you can fire events, you can wait for elements to appear, which again is something I liked a little bit more than Enzyme. Enzyme, sometimes you had an API that when got mocked data, it came back and then you had to re-render manually. You had to tell Enzyme to re-render this component. Now, this is going to function exactly like your component would in real life. So what you can do is you just say, hey, component render, and then you can have an await for this element to show up on your page. And then so as long as your API or your mock data or all that stuff worked correctly, well, when that data, that mock data comes back in, it's going to automatically re-render your application, and the wait for element is going to fire, and then it's going to move on with the rest of the tests. That made testing things like loading states really super easy. I should recommend checking out some of this code here. It's really awesome. In fact, this is some code from the Level Up Tutorials testing series. And let's check it out here. One of the cool things that we did is we mocked some data coming in from an API. Then we rendered our component. And then using React Testing Library, we first made sure that the loading screen was there. After the loading screen was confirmed to be there, we used this await, wait for element, and then watched for the movie link to show up. Now, once that movie link showed up, we then checked to make sure that the loading screen did not exist and that we had a movie link that had a proper href, and we had a movie link with a length of the amount of total movies. So as you can see here, this code is really super clean. When I converted my Enzyme tests to React Testing Library tests, I vanquished a ton of lines of code. And that's really just because it makes doing these things really easy, but it also enforces best practices. I also had to do like no configuration to get it working. I remember in like the latest version of Enzyme, you had to have this certain adapter and you had to have it loaded and all this stuff, or else your test fails for some reason, you know. So for me, React Testing Library is my new go-to testing library because it encourages these best practices. You're just working with DOM nodes, so it's HTML. You don't even think about React. If the question is, how do I test this.state in React Testing Library, the answer is test what's changing in the DOM, right? If it's an accordion, let's say you're opening and closing a modal or something like that, don't test to make sure that the state is set to open, because honestly, do your users care if state is set to open? They don't care. They care if the modal itself is open. So check the DOM nodes to see if the correct things are in the correct places. So this library encourages all of that, and it makes it really nice and easy. I am a huge fan of this library. Like I said, I rewrote all of the Level Up Tutorials tests in React Testing Library from Enzyme, so I definitely had experience in writing a lot of tests in both. And if I were to start my next project and I needed to pick up a testing library for React, I would pick up React Testing Library hands down, which is the main reason why I chose to do a tutorial series on it, right? So if you are interested in learning React Testing Library along with Jest, all of the foundation.
Cool. So this guy, his name is Scott Tolinsky and Wes Boss. They have a podcast called Syntax FM. I haven't listened to them in a while, but it's pretty cool. It's all about web development. Yeah, Scott and Wes. This might be a very good resource for reviewing some of the web stuff we have learned. I remember the last one that I probably listened to was something about CSS units, the difference between percentages, EMs, etc. So they talk about web development in general. Highly encouraged. He also has that Level Up Tutorials where he basically sells his courses over React, etc. So recommended resource there to check out. So you might have not understood what he was talking about when he was talking about an enzyme. Enzyme was a library developed by Airbnb. I actually contributed once to their documentation on GitHub because they missed one part and I was struggling. I was getting an error just because the documentation was not clear enough about what it was expected. And it was really hard to set up. That was the pain that he was trying to convey. For you to test your components with enzyme, you have to think more about React and less about your users. And that's why he was encouraging this library a lot. Let's jump in. Let's see. Well, actually, any questions? Any questions about sort of React testing library, what it is as a whole? Owen?
Oh, so basically it's like the React testing is like runs your component as it would like live to see if it works correctly.
Mm-hmm. That's correct. It's going to let us render components. Rendering a component with enzyme was complicated. With React testing library, it's super easy. We're going to get to see that. So, okay, that's sort of the React testing library as an overview. Let's think about a few things. So, what do you guys remember about the previous lesson on unit testing? Yeah, just throw in whatever comes to mind that you remember from that lesson.
I remember jesting, I think it was called.
Jest, okay. Mm-hmm. Jest is the assertion library we're going to use. Or actually, I should say the framework, Jest.js, is the framework, the testing framework we're going to use. Jest already comes with React, so we don't have to install it. We're actually not going to have to install the React testing library either because it comes with React too. If we were doing a Vue or a native or even a simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript site, we would need to install it manually. What about, do you remember about the types of tests? Who remembers anything about the different types of tests that there are?
Unit, integration, and end-to-end.
A little bit louder, Joy.
Unit, integration, and end-to-end.
Unit, integration, and end-to-end tests. Do you remember anything about those specifically? Like unit tests?
Unit test is like the smallest unit possible to test. Integration is testing the interaction between those units, and end-to-end is the whole system.
That's correct, the whole system. Thank you for that very quick summary. Yeah, so with React, the tests that we're going to be writing with the React are going to be a combination of unit tests and integration tests. And the difference between those two become a little bit blurry with React because, you know, we could think of our units as individual components in React. When we're testing a unit, we could think of just testing one individual component. And when we're testing a component that renders a bunch of other components inside, we could think of that as an integration test because maybe when you change something in component A, that is going to reflect in component C that you haven't done. And it will be testing for the interaction between those components. So we're going to see a combination of those tonight, a unit test, testing an individual component, and an integration test. Now, I think Kenzie Dodds, which is the creator of the React testing library, he argues that if he finds troublesome. This is his blog. I can share it. I don't think I have it linked. But he argues that, or he doesn't like unit tests and integration tests for components. He just calls them I forgot what he called them, but I think he just called them component test actually. And this is I guess the same thing that we were saying. Cool. So now we have to consider a few trade-offs, I guess. So another advantages of unit tests are that they're really quick, they are really fast to run, they're very cheap, and that makes them great. That's why you should have, I guess, here. We can use this graph that we saw in the previous lesson. We saw a pyramid where here he does this cup basically, and unit test should be the base of the cup. You should have the most of that. Integrations not as many, and end-to-end very few. That's the cherry on top. Now let's see. So we're going to be writing that more of cheap, quick tests with the React testing library. We're not going to be writing end-to-end tests in a realistic environment. Yeah, testing with the React testing library offers us a very quick feedback loop between making a change and expecting a result. But this doesn't model the browser well because, well, we're not in the browser, we're in a testing environment. We must remember that these tests that we're going to write are going to run in Node with a mock DOM. Internally, the React testing library has something called the JS DOM, which is a JavaScript implementation of the browser DOM. The browser DOM is written in some other language, but is accessible from JavaScript. The JS DOM is that implementation in JavaScript that will let us mount nodes to the DOM, etc., to this mocked DOM. Oops, I went away. So our test is still going to run in Node, so you don't have anything like our tests are not going to be running in the browser. That's important to remember. On the other hand, we have end-to-end testing with a tool like Cypress that I think I mentioned last time. That these tools offer us a real browser environment. Like you can test your app end-to-end from a real browser environment. But then that reduces iteration speed. Those tests take longer to run, and they can be flakier because they involve many other parts. So you're the developer. If one of those tests fail, you will need to check what part was the one. Yeah, I guess I talked about this, the blurrier line between unit testing and integration testing. Any questions up until this point before we get into setting up? Okay, so to set up, let's clone this app. Let me send this on Slack. So clone this app. I'm going to give you some exercises with it. I'm going to clone this. Yeah, I think we used to have core. Oh, I think I don't have the core folder here anymore. Let me create that. I'll create unit 7. And then let's clone here. Git clone. I'm going to call it testing React. Cool. once we have that, let's open that in VS Code. And let's install the dependencies. Oops, I'm not in the right folder, say testing. And here, okay, here I have to go to React app. So you will need to cd into the React app folder, this one. Now here, let's install the dependencies. Let me hide this. Okay. Oh, cool. So with that install, let me talk about the tools that we're going to use. We're going to use Jest, the React testing library. These are links to the documentation. Highly encourage you to check them out. In fact, to exploit this to its max, you are going to need to read those, some of that documentation. We're going to use Jest-DOM. That comes with React library, the React testing library, but we'll need to check out the docs for some matchers that are there. We're going to use user event. That comes with the React testing library as well. And with user event, we are going to look at how to simulate user interaction. So,
sorry, can you scroll up? I want to see, what did you do with React? You downloaded something?
Oh, yeah, I cloned this repo. I sent the link on the class chat. So clone this repo that is a started app that doesn't have tests yet. We're gonna write a test for it. In fact, you might remember that this was your GoFundMe app that we created. I think that was Unit 3 or 4. Unit 4. It's one of your labs. And I actually took the idea of using this app. I was reviewing some props with Savita, and we reviewed this app. I also took a mean solution to the lab and made some edits. And this is that app that we're going to be testing. We're going to be testing the GoFundMe page, basically.
Okay, so we just have to clone it and that's it?
Clone it and install the dependencies, yes. Mm-hmm. To install the dependencies, you need to cd into the React app.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Other questions or thoughts? Okay. Cool. So this already comes with React. In fact, if we open up our package.json, oops. Oh, wait, what's that? Let me move these controls from the meeting here. Okay. If we open our React app, and if we look in the package.json, we see again that the dependencies are already there. Testing library, Jest-DOM, React, user event. Jest-DOM is not a direct dependency; it's one of those indirectly, but it is installed. If you were writing an app in another language, you will need to install it, as I said earlier. Cool. So that's the first thing. The second thing we want to do is make sure that you have a jsconfig.json file. this file, we have to make it ourselves. I included it in this repo, so you don't have to. This file is just a nice thing about just providing auto-completion for when we're writing tests, so that we don't have to remember there are tons of matchers that there are. You can just, as you're typing, it was going to give you suggestions. That's a really nice feature, but you will need to make sure that in your projects, you have this JS config file. So in short, that's the two setups that we need to do, is just making sure that we have the the dependencies installed. If you're using a recent version of React, you for sure are, and enabling VS Code auto-completion for Jest, so that we don't have to remember as much the matchers. Cool. This is what I was going to tell VS Code to autocomplete Jest stuff. So let's take a look at the app as a review. This was the screenshot that we had given you to mock. I added those boxes on the sides. The pink box is the app. Well, we can actually you'll see it here. Pink outer box is the app. It has the state. We have a recent donation sections. We have a progress bar in red. We have a form in green. And this gives us an idea of the nesting level. And we can see as well the component tree here. The app has 4 children: header, recent donations, progress bar, form. Recent donation has a donation card, which is represented by this blue box here, and it's going to be a URL element. That's where the information about the donation is going to appear. If we look at our code, it's representative of this. If we look at source app.js, we can see here we have a header as our first child. We have recent donations, progress bar, and form. All the same components that we have there. So I guess I didn't realize that there is a container here that contains the rest. So there is, you can think of it as a separate box, around that separates the header from the rest of the page, but that box, it doesn't have any functionality, just a div. We can care about the functionality more. Okay. Any questions about the app or the structure of this app? Douglas?
Sorry, just trying to get my controls back up. The JSON, confirming on screen, the JSON config goes within the React app folder.
That's correct.
Not above that. Okay.
Not above that.
Okay. Cool.
The JS config file goes in your app root folder. Doesn't go within any others. Other questions? Okay, so this is the app we have. You more or less remember the functionality. Let's get our hands dirty. So it is practice. It's standard practice to have a test __ test folder. I'm gonna have. There's two approaches. One is you have a __ test folder for all your tests, or if you have components, like in this case, I will create. This case will create tests __, and we will put in here all our test files. In the case where you have a bigger app that even components themselves have folders because they are complex and are importing other reusable components, where let's say our recent donation was a component that used a bunch of other smaller components, and we had created a recent donations folder to keep everything that's related to recent donations. We'll put our test for recent donations in that folder instead of here. Since this app is small enough, we can just have all our tests in here. So the two approaches is all the test files on the same folder, or test files per component in per component folders. It doesn't really matter which approach you go with. So I created my folder, and let's test our first component, the donation card. So this is that component. Let's take a look at it. It's a very simple component, the donation card. Remember that is this little guy here. I want us to start very small, and we're gonna grow. Test from the simplest first. This is this component. It's a component. Well, actually, let me render this app. Let's not that. npm start. Let's check that it works. Oh, oh yes, James Bond donated. Yeah, cool. Okay, so the donation card is this donation component, and is one of these little guys here. We can see that it's wrapped in an li, and it's wrapped in a div, and it has an h5 and a p tag. We can ignore the classes. These classes are coming from Bootstrap. Amin was using Bootstrap, and that's how he got this to look very close to the mock. And with these classes, if you look at the Bootstrap documentation, you can make things look a certain way. But we can ignore that now. Well, also that reminds me of an important point, which is we're testing functionality. We're not testing looks, basically. We will need to implement another testing approach if we want to test that this button is green, for instance, and that is aligned right. There is some limitations with the test that we're going to do for us to achieve that. But anyway, we have the component. It's basically just an h5 and a p tag. This component renders the name that comes through props, and the amount, and a message. So we can see that this is the name, followed by the word donated, $, the amount. And she didn't leave any message, but we can see here James Bond left a message, good luck. And that's that p tag that appears at the bottom. Okay, questions about the component. Simple component, functional component, receives information through props, doesn't have state. Cool, so let's take a look at how to test this component. So the first thing that you want to do is, in the test folder, create a file with the same name of the component. So I'm going to call it donation card .test.js. Name of the component, but the extension is going to be that test.js. And in here, we're going to start writing our test. Now, there is a few things we need to remember, which is we will need to import. We need to import React from React. React must be in context. It must be in scope, etc. Now, we are going to import our first two functions that are going to let us render components. So we're going to import from the @testing library React. From the @testing library React, we're going to import screen. Actually, render first. Doesn't matter the order, but render and screen. Render is the one that's going to let us test, render stuff. And lastly, we want to import our component. That's going to be that / donation card. Cool. Now let's write a test. Remember that test is a function that comes from jest, always available, etc. So let's say we want to test that the donation card displays a donor's name, amount, and message. So we want to test that given, actually I want to be more precise in the message, passed through props. So we want to make sure that our component, if we pass in certain props, it renders the correct values, the values of the props that we pass. The way in which we do that first is that we need to render the component. The way in which we do that is we call render. And the render function, to the render function, we pass our components, invoking our component like that. This will render our component, this individual component. To our component, we can pass props, just as we would do in our app. So let's pass the props that we expect. Our component expects name, amount, and message. So let's pass in name, type myself, amount. Let's pass in 365. Actually, I don't need the curly brackets. And let's pass in a message. For the message, I'm going to say, I hope you have a good time. Is this still good enough zoom, or is it too small?
That's fine.
Okay. One more confirmation somewhere.
I can use one more tick up.
One more low or
Higher.
Down? Higher. Okay.
Yeah,
let's do it here then.
Agreed.
Cool. So we render a component the same way as we were in React. And the next thing that we can do is then check what is showing up in the screen. And that's where this thing comes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to do screen. Now, this screen and this documentation will come from the test library on React. So, or this is the React testing library, basically. That documentation is linked here, as I said here, React testing library. As we go to the docs, let me expand this here. You see the React testing library here. Let's see. Let's take a look at API. API talks about render, for instance. Cleanup act, we're not going to use these two, but you can find more information about rendering here. We want to look at the screen, so let's try to use this screen. And screen is part of the queries. We're going to talk more about this. This screen element, you can think of it as what is it being rendered in the screen? That's it. What is it being rendered? Now, this screen has a bunch of queries in it that we can call. For instance, it has get by label text or get by text. We're going to be using those to query our DOM and check what components are there and what are their content, basically. All the queries are here in the linked. They are also linked here. Let me go back to our lesson. I think there's an exercise that I want you to do shortly where you're going to go and find some queries. Yeah, the queries documentation is here. And there are these guys by label text, by placeholder text. These are queries that are by the React testing library that will let us query the DOM. Note here that we're not doing document.querySelector or document.getElementById. We're using the ones that React testing library is giving us. So by text, for instance, and by text has these variations: get by text, query by text, query all by text, find by text, find all by text. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say screen get by text. And what we want to do is try to see if the component render as we have it here. What we want is we expect this text to be in the screen. So we can literally say expect for, well, now for my props that I have here, this should say Alejo donated $365. 356, I guess that's the same thing. We can do this. Screen get by text. Now this is going to query the DOM and is going to give us the element if it found it by this text. And that element we're gonna save onto a variable. So I'm gonna call that donation header or heading equals screen get by element. So that's something we expect that was going to be gotten from the DOM. Now we can check if that donation heading is in the document. So the way in which we expect that is we say expect. Again, expect always is a function always available from Jest, and we can say expect the donation heading that to be in the document. And you see that autocomplete, to be called, to be disabled, to be empty. These are all matchers. And this is because we enable that Jest autocompletion. Here, the one we're going to use is be in the document. Be in the DOM used to be the method, but that one has been deprecated. And now it's called be in the document. So we can do something like this. Okay. So we have this. Let's try and run our test, see what we have.
Maleo?
Yeah.
On line 3, are you supposed to have 2 dots or 1 dot?
Line 3. I'm supposed to have 2 dots because of where my test folder are. So
Oh, you put a test folder.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oops. Close that. Let's test our component. So I'm gonna have the one that's running like here, running there, and to test, just do npm test. npm test. Cool. So we passed that test. We are testing that our component is showing a heading that says Alejo donated $365. Now, let me give you 5 minutes to test that the donation card says go to Miami. That is also in the document. How would you do that? So let's take 5 minutes to write that. And let's do, as soon as you think you have something, make sure you try it out. Share it in the Zoom chat. I'm gonna go grab some water while you do that.
Hmm.
Is anyone getting an error message? No.
Still didn't get there for me.
I'm getting a really complicated error as well. I can't even parse what's throwing the error.
Does yours say type error FS events? Where did my terminal go? God damn it.
It is type error FS events is not a function.
Okay, so that's the same error I'm getting.
Okay.
Yep. FS events is not a function. Huh.
Alejo, I'm getting a powerful error, and I cannot figure out. I've gone through the code several times, and I don't see any disparities.
Let's take a look. Share your screen. Can you share your screen?
See if I can. Hold on a second. No, it says you cannot start sharing. Oh, I see.
Try again.
Got it again. Oops. Dart is now hiding behind that. Here I'm going to drag up the. I'll try this a bit wider. If it'll let me. The screen says, "Come on."
Or maybe the green button to make it full screen. At least momentarily.
So I've got a type of FS events. It's not a function.
Could you scroll up?
On which part? On the terminal or on the
Yeah, here in the terminal. Wait, did you install dependencies?
I'm pretty sure I did. I could try again.
Yeah, I see your node modules. Try to remove the node modules and install them again. Anybody else experiencing this error?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, me too.
Huh. This is really weird. Just Hisman. Let me.
How do you drop node modules again?
You could just delete them from here. Click on node modules and.
Oh, okay.
Right click and delete.
Didn't realize it was that easy. Okay, I heard you. And then.
I think Pupil and Savita also try to do the same thing.
Sorry, how do we run the test?
npm test. Instead of npm start, npm test.
Okay. I have to be in the.
Just
what?
You have to be in the app folder, yes.
The root folder? Okay.
No, in the app folder. Whatever you have your package JSON.
Yeah, okay. I call it that the root folder. I don't know. Is it wrong?
Yeah, I mean that's the root folder of the app.
Yeah.
But it's not the root folder of the repo.
A repo, that's true. In this case.
Okay. Douglas.
It's about 75% there to the install.
Okay.
I don't want to hold up class though, but
let me know if you get that error again. I think then I'll just ask to pay attention rather than trying to fix the error.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Okay. Can one of you share in the chat here in Zoom what you came up with to check that there was also a message underneath? They go to, in this case, that there is, I hope you have a good time message.
I'm getting command not found.
And you're doing npm test.
Yeah. Want me to share the screen?
Let's take a look. Let's take a quick look.
You see it?
I think you. Wait, show me where you are. LS. Okay, and the npm test. I don't think you installed the dependencies, or did you? Okay, I think maybe you did.
I looked at my package JSON and I saw I have React scripts
Mm-hmm.
and
But
I
you
have
see,
the
when you
testing.
that's correct. But you when you did ls, there was no node modules folder.
Oh, I didn't do npm I because I just cloned it because this is my new computer. Okay.
Uh-huh.
That okay.
So then
Now,
after that, you should be okay.
okay, let's try it just in case.
Any other problems? Anybody else?
I have a problem.
What does it say? An error?
It's complaining. It's really long. So I'm trying to go back to.
What's the first line?
Let me find it. Oh. It says there might be a problem with the project dependency tree.
Let's take a look. Can you share your screen?
Yeah.
Oh wait, I have to stop sharing so you can share. So, yep. Show me what folder you're on. Maybe just do ls. Wait, try there ls. Okay. Oh, I think this is because you're not in the React app folder. You need to cd into the React app folder and then try npm start or npm test there. Did you install the dependencies? Let's see. I think no, but the package JSON the package JSON is okay. Let's check if you have a node modules folder. Do ls in where you currently are. As you do have a node modules folder. Yeah, let's do ls anyway. Just because I am suspecting that something about node modules. Okay, we can see it there too. Let's take then a closer look at the error. If you could do npm test again, please. And then scroll to the first line. Yeah, around here, I guess. Oh, sorry, just keep scrolling down. I think we passed it. This it says React script packages provided. They create React app. Requires a dependency jest. And then if you scroll down, there was a different dependency. Oh, I think we had talked about this briefly. This happened when we install. This happened when we install Jest globally when we did our unit test. What you will need to do is remove Jest from the global installation directory. So I think, Joanne, you need to do, if anyone else is getting this error about a different version being detected higher up in the tree, what you need to do is uninstall the global Jest that we have installed. So Joanne, you will need to do npm uninstall -g. Yeah, exactly. space jest. Let's see. Let's try now. npm install. Oh wait, I'm not sure if that worked.
It's still here.
No, it will still be here, but because that's the local one. But we have we used to have a global one. So try to run npm test again, and if this doesn't work, then we'll need to take a closer look later. Okay, so I think we're gonna need to take a closer look at the end then. Just then, if you're having trouble, make sure to pay attention, look at my output, look at what I'm typing closely, and ask any questions. Cool.
Okay.
So then I'll need you to stop sharing so that I can share. Let me try this again. npm test. Okay. I'm not sure. I just tried to replicate that same error that you were getting, Joanne. But yeah, we'll need to look at it later on. Okay, so here we wanted to test that our component. Wait, actually, let me get a sense of how many of you were able to accomplish that. If you go onto the participants tab, and if you could give me a yes if you were able to run the test. I guess a no if you were not able to. Okay, so where is everybody else? Everyone should be able to answer if they were able to run the tests. Give me a yes if you were able, no if you were not able to. Okay, so we have about half and half. Yeah, then my advice will be, since you can't run the test, you will need to pay special attention. And then we can look into what the matter might be. Okay, so here we wanted to test. If we go back, let me close some of the stuff that I no longer need.
Sorry, Alejo, do we have to install Jest, npmi Jest?
No, you wouldn't need to install npm Jest because Create React App already has Jest in. You just need to install the dependencies for the app itself. Okay, so we wanted to test this. Are any questions about this so far? Any question about how this test is working as to what we have right now? Okay, so to check if we also have an element that is, I hope you have a good time, what we can do is really the same thing. So let's say message p tag, and let's say screen get by text. I hope you have good. And let's then expect that to be in the document, that message p to be in the document. Let's run our test again. npm test. And then our test is still passing. Okay, but tests that pass are not very interesting. Right? You care about a test when it doesn't pass. You don't care as much if it passes. So let's make this test break. So what could I change in donation card so that the test doesn't pass anymore? How can I change the donation card component for the test to break?
One of the props, the name, I mean.
Like if I misspell one of the props, say,
yeah,
message. Instead of message, I put message. Let's say have a misspelling there. Let's save that. As I save, the tests are going to rerun because Jest is in watch mode automatically when I do npm test. Just is checking for any changes in the files, and when I save, the test should rerun. And now our test should fail, and we can take a look. So it says donation card displays donor name, amount, and message pass through props. And then it says unable to find an element with the text. I hope you have a good time. This could be because the text is broken up into multiple elements, etc. And also this is nice. It's showing us what we have in the screen basically. What we have in the screen here is just a div with an li, and we see that our text here. So we see that our text, it is rendered correctly, right? But wait, sorry, let's see. H5. Oh, right. This is no. We see the Alejo donated heading, but we don't see the p tag underneath that should say, I hope you have a good time. This one we did find, right? And this is this text that we see here. A nice thing about the React testing library and Jest is that it shows us what we currently have on screen printed in this way when the test fails. So we do have this. We have the Alejo donated 365 in the screen with an p tag, but with an h5 tag, but we see an empty p tag, right? That's because then we have that spelling mistake in our prop, and now our test doesn't pass anymore. At this point is when you look at the test and you try to figure out what went wrong. And then in doing so, you know whether your test failed or not. So let's fix that. As we fix that, then we have the test passing again. Same here, like if I change this to has donated, now we're going to see, also I forgot to mention that this shows you the line of the test that is currently making it fail, I guess. Line 9. And you have a small description and a small pointer to where exactly that is. And here we have the opposite. Now it says that in the screen is showing Alejo has donated 356. And now we see our p tag. I hope you have a good time. But my test was checking for Alejo donated, not Alejo has donated, etc. So this is then how we can see our tests passing or failing. And it's going to point to you here, if you look carefully, what line of code you should revise and start investigating for. Cool. So we tested the donation component. Now, what I want you to do, but I think we're just gonna have to keep going because a lot of you couldn't run the test. But actually, even before we move on, I want to ask for any questions around here. How do we? We're just checking if something is in the document. So if something appears.
Alejo, I have a silly question. So I actually got my test to run, but I pressed no because I thought that it should say 2 tests pass because I saw expected twice.
That's a good question, actually. So I'm having this is as 1 test pass.
Yeah.
Now this 1 test is this test.
Okay, I see. That's all wrapped in that.
That's correct.
Okay.
So the number of tests is the number of function test calls that you have. The expects are
just trials, or I don't know.
Correct, more granular about what do you expect to happen.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. You could think of, maybe we will need to write another test for this to check that the paragraph appears. And we could, but this is such a small test that 1 test for this functionality is small enough, encapsulate enough that we can do it in 1. Okay. Another thing that you might want to test here, I don't know if I put it in here. No, I didn't put it, but this is another thing you could do is, let's say you expect the donation heading. Note that this donation heading is an HTML element. So it has everything that an HTML element will have, like a tag name. So we could check that the tag that has Alejo donated is an H5, which is what we saw. So we can say tag name that to be H5. And then we can say the same for, oops. We can say the same down here. This we expect it to be in a paragraph. Tag names are all by default capital, so that's why I'm capitalizing that. If we run the test again, oops, I forgot to change here. Message. And then we can see that passing. So now we have 4 specs. And we're checking that they are being rendered in their respective tags. This to be is a just matcher that we saw before. To be in the document, this is a special matcher, I shouldn't say a special matcher. Is an extension of jest that comes from the jest DOM. If we look at the documentation, and I want you to find some in a little bit, some of the most used ones. I think it's this one. Yeah, the just matchers. So here we have a bunch. We're gonna be using some of these. To be disabled, to be enabled, to be empty, to be in the document, to have focus, to have style. This style, as I was saying earlier, has some limitations. You want to look at that. To be checked, if it's a checkbox stuff and thing. You have the deprecate, as I mentioned earlier, to be in the DOM. You should not use it. You should use to DOM document, to be in the document. These are custom matchers that come from just DOM. Okay. Now here, this is something that I wasn't sure about if this should be included in the test to check that is rendered in an H5. I think it's up to the developer basically, because here I could think, well, checking that is in an H5 is an implementation detail. The user doesn't care if it's a P tag or if it's an H5, as long as for the user it looks like this is bigger than the other thing, right? But you may, you may or may not want to include this type of text, etc. Okay, so we tested this component. And this is a small enough component. This is, we're testing this unit. Any questions?
Is there a way to test their order as well?
Their order, like that.
Like if the message is right after the H5 or not?
There is a way in that what you do, but we don't have time to get into it. It will be checking the parent of these two components that you can access through parent node. Actually, let's try to do it real quick. So we can say here, we can say something like let parent equal donation heading that parent element. Parent element is another one of those standard. This is in the DOM components or nodes. And then I think we could do something like expect. This it requires you to remember a lot of the DOM stuff. I think it will be expect parent that children nodes at index 0, which is the first one, to be the donation heading. Let's see if this passes. Oops, do I have a weird E here? Yeah, and then you just check that the second one is the message P. So this is in a way that I didn't really think about it when I was writing it, but if you want to test the order, this is some way you could do it. I think, let's see. Now that made me remember that there might be, yeah, no. I was thinking that there is a parent way to check for that relationship. Let me know if later on you find a better way. This feels a little bit, this works. In fact, if we swap them, we should see them fail. Yeah. So we can see how it expected that to be an H5, but instead got the P type. So this is a way in which you could check the order, but it feels a little bit. I think it's okay, but it feels that it should be more verbose, more being able to understand it a little bit more plain English than going to do this. But this child nodes, it's all standard from the DOM. Some of you might have seen that when we were in Unit 2, etc. Yeah, we ended up checking for their right order, etc. Okay, other questions? Okay, let's take a 5-minute break, and don't leave the meeting. Just go grab water. Let's be back here at 8:36.
Like a quick question.
Yep.
How come I can't do, like, when you do the initial render up top, how come you can't do multiple tests to check things like if it's in a document?
You mean like having multiple renders?
Not just the one render, but then having multiple tests, just like kind of organize it.
You want to share this render across tests, right?
Yeah, remember we tried that, but we just couldn't.
Yeah, we're not supposed to really do that because then there, and I don't know if it will give you an error. It probably will give you an error, or if not, a warning, because then if you try to use the same render, that means that what one test changes might influence the result of other tests. So you will need a render per test. That's actually a good question. As we write other tests for other components, you will need a render per test. You should not share renders, like taking this render out like that. You shouldn't do this. And you see, it passes. But you shouldn't do that, because if this test changes something in the DOM and then the other test checks for some other change or some other value, then tests will influence each other, and that is undesirable, basically. It can make your test less reliable. So, good question. Okay. Cool. So we have our first test testing a very small component. I think I want to move on to, I'm going to skip this, testing the status bar. We do very similar. Actually, let's talk about it, but I'm not going to write it because there is a small change in this one. So for the progress bar, which if we recall here, is this thing here. We want to test two things. One is, clicked on it, that this text appears like that, raise whatever amount of whatever target. That's the first thing that we want to check. The second thing we want to check is that the progress bar displays the right percentage. In this case, 44.10%. Let me show you how we'll do that. Oh, also, I should have said this at the beginning, but I forgot. There is, I put a branch here, not here, sorry. The repo that we cloned, the starter app, here there is this branch, tested app. That branch has all the code, all the tests basically that I'm writing here. So if you go to that tested branch, you will be able to see all the tests that we wrote for that and components test. The test that I'm writing right now might be slightly different. Like for instance, that change about checking the order, but generally this here is tested. So you can have that as a reference already. So that's on that end. Here, as we want to test these two things, let's talk about how we did it here. Checking for the status bar. We want to check that it displays the raise amount of the total in the format raise amount of total in a heading. It displays the progress bar with proper percentage. So here we have that. We have, one thing that changes, now we have a describe for the progress bar, and we put the test inside of the describe. We do this because we're going to write more than one test. You're writing more than one test, it's better to wrap it in a describe so that this test becomes tied to the progress bar specifically. Okay. This displays in that format. We have the same thing. We render, we call our component, we pass our props. Note here that I'm passing the props that I define here as variables. And this is not going to work, but we're going to talk about why. You may, from the previous example, you may say, okay, then I could just say screen.get by text, and try to get something that has this, that is raised by whatever raised amount of whatever target amount, and we put these dollar signs because in the output, we need those $signs. The second $sign is to do the string interpolation of JavaScript. And then we can do something like expect status heading to be in document. Now, this wouldn't work. This will give us an error. The error will be this one: unable to find an element with the text raise 170 of 1,000. And it's important to read all error messages very carefully, because then it says this could be because the text is broken up by multiple elements. In this case, you can provide a function for your text matcher to make your matcher more flexible. Now, why does it say that the text could be broken in multiple elements? It's because, well, it is. If we look at our component, let me show you that component here. I'll show you. I'll put it here. Let's put not donation card. I'm interested in progress bar. If we look at progress bar, it has a div progress, another div progress bar, and in here it has the progress. Oh, actually, what I want to show you is this: the header. See the header? It says raise amount of. Then there's a span tag, and then there's the target amount inside of that span tag. So even though in the screen it will look like this is one thing, what happens is that we have what we have here. We have an H4, and inside of that H4 we have a span. So this text raise 170 from 1,000 is broken out into multiple elements. There is a span tag nested. And the reason for this span tag is so that you can display that with a different style. This text muted is so that we have this sort of grayed out, and that's a bootstrap thing where you apply that class text muted that we have in our code, so that this will be gets grayed out a little bit. So going back to this, the text fails because there is no unbroken element or unbroken test with this exact text inside, because again it's divided. There is a nested span. So what we need to do here, when you have sort of nested and you want to check for test, what you can do is what we did here. We get them individually, basically. Here we have race, and we get screen get by text, and I say race whatever amount off, and then I say target screen get by text, and whatever the target amount is. And then here we just say expect the race to be in the document, expect the race tag name to be an H2, expect target to be in the document, which is, again, this target will be the span tag, the race will be the H tag, then we expect that to be a span. And here we check the relationship, which here we're saying, okay, since these tags are nested, the parent tag is the target, the H2. We can say, right, actually the target is this span tag. So we say, okay, expect the target parent element to be race, which basically is another way of saying expect race to be nested within the target. Expect the parent target to be race, which is again the H2 heading, basically. Questions or comments about this? You have to be mindful that if maybe for the user the screen looks like a one paragraph, but if there's nested elements or is broken up, you will need to take into account that in your test. There is an alternative here where you could do it all with this match to have text content. I'll let it for you to check it out. Okay. Let's talk actually. So I'm just gonna copy. I'm gonna copy this test. Put in my code. Let's create that file. So tests created call progress bar.test.js. Let's see this failing if we do npm test. Render is not defined. Oh. Here, remember, this is because I forgot to include, import React, import render and screen. So I'm gonna do this, progress bar test, paste that here. Also, let's import our component. Progress bar. Say that again. Now we see that, well, our donation card test still passes, so that one is good. And then we get the error that we were talking about. We have it printed here as well, H2, and we see the span nested. So let me just copy this. That divides the getting of the elements, and let me have it here. So I'm gonna remove this. Our test should pass. Okay, so we have that tested. Any questions or comments about this? Okay, here we're just testing if some text is appearing. Now let's test a little bit of logic that this component has. This component has the logic of calculating that percentage. Given the raised amount so far and the target amount, calculating the percentage, I'm showing that. This part here, where if I make another donation, now that moved to 28%. So this is logic that component has. It's not much. It's still logic dependent on the props. If we look at progress bar, we can see a few things. One is we have this progress where we do that little bit of logic, little bit of math, saying, okay, raise the amount, multiply that by 100, and divide it by the target. Right, and that's going to give us a percent number. And what we have here is just a style object with a width where we say, okay, whatever progress we got there, attach the percent sign at the end. And use that as our style prop here. As our style prop here. This, the style prop lets you pass in styles to your elements from JavaScript, from React. There are some limitations, or not limitations, but you have to be, if you want to pass in the background color, for instance, you have to do background capital C color instead of background dash color. That background dash color will be the one in CSS, but in JS it will need to be background color, say pink. Background color pink. I think it's because it doesn't apply because of the bootstrap stuff. Okay, here we just have that style and we pass it directly here. this style applied from JavaScript is fine, especially it's actually necessary for this, so that you make this style, what is being used for is to make this be 70% of the width of the other element. The way in which this progress bar was done is has an outer div progress. That's the one that is grayed out here. And that is set to a certain width. And then there is this inner div, progress bar BG success. Oh, that BG success is what it gives it the green color. That progress bar is then this div here, this little green div that we have here. And we're just saying, well, we want that div to be as wide as whatever percentage we specify. And that's then how we can achieve that behavior of having an element or implementing a status bar, basically, by saying how wide that element should be from respective to their parent component. And so we do the math here of the race amount versus the target amount, and we use that progress for our style. Note that also the progress or the number itself, that 17%, is also shown here. That's what makes it appear here. In fact, let me show you this. If I select this here, see, this is that div, the progress VG success. We can see the style also applying with 17. Also another thing is style that you applied from JavaScript becomes here inline style. This style overrides any style applied through CSS. That's something that you want to keep in mind. Style that is applied through the style property or the style attribute, I should say, overrides the one in CSS. So if you have something that applies that's trying to modify the same style, the same element, you have some styles in JavaScript and some styles in CSS, the styles in JavaScript will take precedence because they become attributes here, and this always takes precedence. Let's put back this background color. Let's see if it appears there. Pink. Yeah, we see it there, color pink. Yeah. So we see background color pink here. And then we see this was what gave me a lot of trouble when I was doing my capstone project and we were doing Bootstrap. Now, so here I'm gonna contradict myself about the styles that are specified in JavaScript taking precedence over the ones in CSS. That is true for the most part. It is not true when you say exclamation mark important in CSS. If you say exclamation mark important in CSS, then the browser will take that one over the one that is specified in JavaScript. You should very rarely use exclamation important. Unless you really know what you're doing. That makes it important. That's why it's called $sign important. And then that one takes precedence over the other one. If I move this one, then my bar becomes pink. Okay, so how we test that functionality is then we check that we try to grab an element that has the percentage that we calculate, and then we can check the style to see if its width is 17% of what we have. Now let's take a look at that then. Let me close the donation card because we're not there anymore. Now let's write a second test. So test displays percentage in progress bar. let's say progress bar has proper, or has width according to percent is calculated. Displays progress bar that has, actually let's do this. According to the percentage calculated and displays as well as displays. Cool. Or the first argument is a description. The second argument is a callback function. Okay, so to test that, simply we render first. Render, this is progress bar. Also, let's just set here let target amount. Actually, I'm just going to copy that from here. But I'm actually going to change this. Let's say we have $500. So that should be 50%. Then let's calculate the percent ourselves here. So that we can do the, so we have it, percentage. And let's do it the same way it was implemented in the component with raise amount times 100 divided by the target amount. Cool. So we have our percentage. What then we can do is try to get an element from the DOM that has this text on it. So let's try to do percentage element equal, actually let's just call it progress bar. Progress bar is equal to screen get by text, and let's pass in our percentage there. Lastly, let's check that the progress bar let's expect that to be in the DOM, to be in the document. Oh, I should have rendered first, so let me render here, expect here. Okay, really quickly, I guess I wanted to ask if that test was going to pass, but I forgot that it's running automatically. We can see that it didn't pass. Before I show you why it didn't pass, why do you think it didn't pass?
Maybe because it's missing the percentage.
It's missing
the sign.
The percentage where?
It should display like 50%. You're missing the sign for percent.
Right, maybe I'm missing the sign per percent. Let's take a look at here. Get by screen matcher test is not a function. Oh, actually, we have another error. Let's try to rerun that. To rerun your test, you can type A to run them all. Matcher test is not a function. Line 30. Screen get by text. Can anyone see the error or the problem? Let's try this. Try it 17%. Actually, 50%. Let's try this first. Okay, so now it passed. Now it passes. And that gives me the idea that then the type may matter. Percentage here is a number. So let's try to see if it breaks, if we try to do a number again here. Yeah, okay. It fails with that same error. Matcher.test is not a function. And actually, this is in that documentation, and I forgot. Get by text is expecting text, is expecting a string here. In fact, if we do that, you see text matcher. That matcher can be a string, can be a function, or it can be a regular expression as well. If we get a number, we get a very confusing error. Maybe this could be an issue that is opened up in the repository. For this to actually show, maybe give you a warning saying, or an error saying, matcher must be text, regular expression, or function. It can't be a number. Instead, it throws a very confusing error. What we can do here is, if we want, we could type $50, 50% like that. That will work. I actually want to use the variable, so what I can do is this just simple concatenation. There's the percentage plus that, where this is the percentage value that we got. So we join that ends up being a string, and we get our element. I think, if at any point you want to look at whatever you have in the screen, I think you can do screen that. Let's see, is it print? No, screen debug maybe. Let me try this. I don't remember. Yeah, so you can do screen that debug to see what you have so far. Here we can see that after, for this target amount and for this raise amount, our progress bar calculates the proper percent and it shows it there. What we do with this is get it, try to get it. If it's there, then that means our component is working as we expected. It's calculating the percentage as we expect. Questions, thoughts?
Can you repeat what screen debug does?
Yes, screen debug prints this into the terminal for us to look at what is currently in the screen. Even though there is no screen really, but this is for us to take a look at the HTML that's being rendered, basically. So it might be helpful to look at what you have, but we wouldn't. At the end, we will remove that because we don't want that output. Just for us to debug what we have in the screen, see that we have everything what we expect.
Okay.
Yeah, Leo, I have a bug, but I don't feel confident in like trying to solve it. Can you run me through like what would you do?
What does it say?
Just pointing at my line 12. It's saying displays the raised amount of total in the format, raised amount of total in heading. Something with the progress bar.
Let's share your screen.
Okay.
Let me stop mine. Oh, I just realized that this laptop actually has a touch bar. It puts the zoom controls there. Just nice.
Right.
Oh, wait. Oh, no. Oh, it is recording. Okay. I thought it was not recording. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it has something to do with the first test. I skipped it, but yeah, it points to line 12, and I'm like, okay, so I'm looking at line 12. What am I supposed to do with that?
So the first thing is you want to go to the top of the test. That's where the most meaningful message is.
Okay. I know it's like a typo somewhere, but.
So here is, you see, it says unable to find element with text raise, $ off, period. That period is weird. But it wouldn't be there actually. It's probably, you probably have it.
On 12 and 13?
Oh, sorry, no. That period is just where they end the sentence.
Okay, there's a space there. Should that be empty
No, the space should be there.
there?
Now keep scrolling. Scroll down a little bit. Yeah. Wait, scroll up. Let me see the HTML here. Raise $. Yeah, I think it is definitely a spelling mistake somewhere.
Okay.
But I can't see it at the moment.
I'll take a peek around. Thanks.
Yep. Oh, something you can do if you want to skip a test, but you can do test that skip, and that will the next time that test is not going to be run. But make sure that at the end you don't have any that skip. Okay, so other questions? Okay, so we see that our component displays the percentage appropriately. Now let's check that we can check this style to check that is 17% of its that the style width is 70%, or so it's not 70 according to whatever we passed, according to whatever percentage we calculated here. Now, to do that, what we can do is say progress bar. So let's expect progress bar.
You're not sharing your screen.
Oops. Thank you. There we go. So what we can do is do progress bar. So since we need to remember that this progress bar is an HTML element. And even though we're not in a real DOM, this will behave as close as possible to the real DOM. Therefore, we have tag name, we have children, child nodes, children, parent, all that stuff. We also have then style, and we can say expect that the style that width that to be percentage plus $. Let me remove this screen debug. We have our test passing. If we say expect this to be 75%, you should see our test failing. And we get that expected 75, we receive 50. Now, this works because we're applying the style in JavaScript like so with the style attribute. I was looking into the documentation to see if even if the style is being applied through CSS, if we could test if you select a background color and you apply that through CSS, not in JavaScript, if it will let you know. But I couldn't get that to work. There was something in the documentation that suggested that that was possible, but I wouldn't rely on it because I think this, I haven't verified this, but for the browser to render you CSS, there needs to be a CSS engine. I don't think this has a CSS engine built in for the virtual DOM. If you want to test, that's why I said at the beginning, these kind of tests are limited for what you can test, anything that you want to access that's visual. Here, in fact, we could test, we're just testing that the style width was set to 50%. That doesn't mean that it's going to be 50% in the screen. In most browsers, it will be 50%, but there's no guarantees really. Every browser is different. But here we can just check because we know that we want this style to be applied to our progress bar. And since it's going to be applied from like JavaScript land, then we can just check that. Questions or thoughts? Douglas.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around why we would need to implement tests when we can just simply make alterations and see them one-to-one. Is it faster to implement a test like this, or safer if it's a deployed site to test like a build of the code? Is that what we're doing?
That's a great, really good question. Like, we're testing. We could just change something and look at the browser and see if the changes look like what we want, and that's still one testing strategy. You're testing manually. The benefit of this comes when you have a more complex app that is going to change, that is being changed by different people, and you want to make sure that everything's still working. So this is more of a microscopic scale. I think we're going to get to see a little bit more as we test app, that we're testing a little bit more moving parts. But this is the foundation of where at the end somebody makes a change, or even before a merge, when a pull request is made, you can run all your tests to see that nothing broke, basically. So yeah, these components that we're testing here are very small. You could say that the manual test of us going in, checking if it's correct, is faster. But in the long run, this will be faster and better. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yep.
Sorry, I have a question about the reason. Why didn't the percentage work the first time you put it? Is it because you hadn't added the symbol, the percentage symbol?
Yes, because I had this and I was passing in percentage here is a number. This is going to return to us a number, right? The calculation. But to get by text, I can't pass a number. I must pass a string, a regular expression, or a function. So that's why it didn't work, because I'm passing a number and it doesn't like numbers. On top of that, well, there was no percentage sign. The percentage sign then makes this entire thing a string, and that gives us our match. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense, though?
Yeah, it does.
Cool. Great. Other questions? Okay. So let's take a look. So then here we implemented that. Just checking that things are appearing in our screen, basically. Simple test. Now let's test form. Let's test a few things of the form, and we're going to test app. I think looking at, we're kind of short in time, a little bit behind schedule, but let's take a look at what we have here. So for testing the form, again, I refer to the fully tested app branch that I have, where you can refer to that. Here, what we're gonna do is, I don't know why this didn't. So let's take a look at the form first. Here, so a form is a little bit more complicated because there is state updates when the user types on something. When the user hits submit, we want to test that all that stuff is working. So the test that we're gonna implement, I think, did I put them here? I didn't put them here. I wanted to list them, but we're gonna test. We're gonna test that our handle input change function is being called whenever the user types something, and that our handle submit function is being called when the user clicks submit, instead of manually us having to click the button. Those are the two main things that we want to check. We could also test whether all the input fields appear. We're gonna see some side effects of that, or how can we get the input fields, for instance. But the core, what we want to check is if the user types in something in the input box, let's check that their handle input change function is called. And then when the user hits submit, the handle submit function is called. Now, let's take a look at form. So form is receiving all this stuff from props, is receiving the form donor, the form message, the form amount, the handle submit, and the handle form input from props. So know that form actually is still a functional component. It doesn't have class, doesn't have state. Now we have a handle input change that is attached to the input. So if we look at here, we have 3 inputs. We have input 1, which is the name input. This is really good practice. The fact that it has the label HTML4 name input. This is what puts this thing here, the label on top of it. In fact, we're gonna need the label to be able to get the input box from our DOM. If we don't have the label, it becomes harder to get the input. And also, we wanna use the label because labels, we can use the label or the placeholder to get the element from the DOM. We want to use the label or the placeholder specifically because that's the way in which a user will be able to locate your input box. If an input box doesn't have name or doesn't have like text placeholder, for a user will be harder to find out where it is. So this is the other thing about this library. It encourages you to think of accessibility and user experience by not letting you get an input box by doing query selector input, for instance. You have to put a label or a placeholder. Ideally, you put both. Okay, so we have that input, the name input, we have the message input, and we have the amount input. These are type text. This is type range. That range is what's going to give us this slider. And so for all of these, we have handle input change, handle input change, handle input change. So that when the change event fires, we call our function. Here, we have that function here, handle input change. What it does is it grabs the ID from the element and the value, and it just calls the function that came from props, handle form input, with that ID and with that value. Now the handle form input function came from app because the state is in the app. So if we look at app.js, we can see here the props that we're passing. We have the handle submit, handle form input. Let's take a look at this handle form input. We have it here. This handle form input. What this handle form input is doing, and this shouldn't surprise you, is checks if the ID is the name input. If the ID is the name input, then it's gonna set the form donor part of the state to that value. If it's the message input, it's gonna set the form message part of the state to that value. If it's the amount input, then it's gonna set the form amount value of the state to that value. There is a more concise, shorter way to do this, but this is fine. This works. It's just that based on the ID, we set in our state. If we look at our state, we set the form donor name, the message, or the amount. And then this function, our handle form input function, we just give to our form so that our form can set the state of our app. Any questions about that? Okay. Oh, I think, let me see. Diagrams.net, not that. This is drive, draw. I think I have a a diagram that I have made here. Oh, yeah. Oh, here. Open this in here. Now this is the state that we have. We have in our state, this is our app. We have our state represented by this cylinder, name, caption, amount to donate. Well, this has a slightly different names, but it's the same. Our target amount is goal amount. Amount to donate is our, I forgot what we call it on the other side. And we have some state setters like handle name, handle caption. And those we're gonna pass to our donate form so that donate form can set the state of our app. In this case, handle name and handle caption, we abstracted into one that is called handle form input. As we can see here, this function is able to set those. We pass that as props. Okay, so we have our form. Any questions about the form itself? Okay, so let's then write a test for this form. Let's take a last look at it. Receiving everything from our props. Lastly, calling the handle form input on change. Handle input change. We see that the handle submit also comes from props. So what we're going to do here, and we're going to see something new here. Let's create our test function. Our test file, form.test.js. Let me copy all of this because we need React, render, and screen. Instead of importing the donation card, we want to import the form. And we're going to say describe form. And then we're going to say test. So what I want to test first is that our handle form input is being called whenever the user types something in that box. So let's call that input change handle by what did I call it in the form? By handle form input. When fill text changes. Okay, so this is what we want to test. Why would we want to test this functionality?
To see if, like, when you type something in the input, it actually changed the state.
And it changed the state where?
App.
In app, right? So this is then, if we think about it, this is more like a, well, actually, no, this is still a unit test because we haven't included app yet. But that's correct. We want to check that our state setters function is being called when the user inputs something. This is sort of checking the types of our app. Okay, so to test that, the first thing that we want to do is render. Let's start with render. Let's render the form. Close this here. I'm going to close this here. Put this a little bit like that. Okay, we rendered a form, but our form is expecting form donor, message, amount, handle, submit. here we are only interested in the handle form submit. So let's pass this form donor. I'm going to pass some sample data. Let's go. This is Jon Snow. Form amount. Let's pass this 734. Form message. Say goodbye.
Alejo,
Yep.
Joey needs to join.
Oh, let me see. Oh yeah, I saw that he sent a message that he had to restart his laptop. Let me take a quick look at that. Participants. Oh, there he is. Thank you, for raising it up.
These colors like blue and gray and white. Think like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is very businessy. Even Facebook.
I think Joey. Yep. Okay. So we passed those. Actually, I'm gonna start breaking this because this line is gonna be too long. So I want to break this like this. Okay. Something like this. We're gonna pass our handle form input. Now this here we need to pass in a function. The function that usually we will pass from app, right? We will pass, if we look at app, we will pass this handle submit. We will pass it as props to our form. Now, we are rendering form, but outside of app, right? But we still want to check if that function is called whenever the user changes something in the input boxes. So what we're going to do, this is the new concept. We are going to mock a function. We're going to create a mock function that's going to let us know if the function was ever called. This is a very useful concept. Mocking the function, you just care if it was called. You don't care about how the function works. The way in which we will do that is I'm going to create a function here called const handle form input mock, and I'm going to create that function with jest. I'm going to say jest fn. This creates a function. It creates a special jest function that will let us know if it was called. We can tell a few things with it. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to pass that function here to our handle form input. So whenever the input changes, the function that is going to be called is our handle form input mock. And then we're going to check if that form was called, first of all, and if it was called with the stuff that we are expecting to be called. So the way in which we will do that is we render, we have our function. Then we need to actually enter text in the input boxes, right? This is what the user will do, like enter text in the input boxes. That is the second new thing. How to enter text in the input box from a text, because again, we're not in the browser. This is not the user. What we're going to do for that is we're going to import. Oh, actually, I think it's here already. Let me check. Let me check the lesson. If I, yeah, okay, no, I don't have it. We need this line. We need to import user event from the user event. So I'm just gonna copy this. Now, user event is a very small library. It has a few functionality. Let me see if I think I have the documentation here. All this stuff, user event is also part of the testing library, so it comes with it. I have to import it separately though. And here I have click. I can create click events with this library. Double click. I can type to text. Select options for a drop down. Tab, and that's it. Those are the actions you can type that you can do. So what we are going to do here is, let's take a look at the documentation for type. Type. Write text inside of an input or a text area. You need to call type with the element and pass in the text that you want. And then they give you an example here. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at this then here. We're gonna say user event that type, and I need to pass in here the element in which I want to type and the text. Let's say I want to type. Oh, actually, you know what? I think we should start with empty. Should start with empty elements here. Let's start with an empty name and empty. Well, actually, the amount by default should be 5. Start with an empty message. Because if I start with a name here, then the text, the input field would already have that name because that's the way we have set up our component. I'm going to start with empty here. So our input boxes are empty at first. But here I need to type in the element, or meaning what input box do you want to type into? And we need to get the input box first. We will need to get the input box first. So the way in which you can get the input box is again with screen. But now we will need to use not get by text because input boxes don't have text. They don't have text inside. Even if I had something here like that, this would be the value. It wouldn't be the text. What we need to do here now is look at our queries. So I'm going to go to the documentation for the queries, which is in just DOM. Oh, actually, not here. It's in the testing library documentation, queries. And here, we can take a look at all the available queries. Somewhere around here, there is by placeholder. So I could get an element by the placeholder. My input boxes have placeholder. I could use that. By text, by alt text, by title, display value, role, test ID. Wait, it must be one that is by label text, exactly. This is what we're gonna use. So we're gonna say screen get by label text. And the label text that we had added to our form, let me put this here, is name. That's the label. So I'm gonna say name. So I get the element that has that label text. I'm gonna say this is the name input. Get that label text. Then I'm gonna do it with one first, and then I'm gonna say name input. And let's say I want to type in there. I want to type there Jon Snow, something like this. So right now our tests are passing, but that's because we're not making any assertions yet. Here, then we can make an assertion. So Well, actually, let's try this. Let's do screen.debug. Let's see if we maybe, oh, well, actually, we're not going to see it because the input, if I do screen debug and we see the screen being outputted here, we see the label name, we see the input, but you see it doesn't have a value here because this is the HTML. The value is sort of internally. This is just the HTML. We can't see the value here. I thought we would, but I was wrong. So the debug doesn't do much there. What I want to do is check if my handle form input function, in this case the mock one, was called. But we will do that with saying expect the function handle form input mock to be called. Do this. See, so our tests are passing, but we don't really know if this is really working because they were passing before. What if we try not to be called? Now one test fails. In fact, then we can see our function here. Expect just function not to be called, but it was called. It was called 8 times. Wait, that's interesting. Why 8 times when they only type? Oh yeah, 8 times. 8 letters we type in. So we can see that it's failing now because I was expecting it not to be called, but it was called. So that's what we want to check. We want to check that it was called. So this is a mock function, a way in which you can mock a function and tell whether it has been called or not with this matcher to be called. For learning more about mock functions, I added some resources. I leave resources everywhere for you to keep exploring. Here. Function matchers to have it call. So those are function matchers. They have come from Jest, and they let us check if a function has been called. Now, the next thing that we want to do is we want to check with what values the function was called. So we can do expect handle for an input mock to be called, or actually this is the nice thing about the autocomplete. I didn't remember the name exactly, but what I want is to have been called with, especially to have been last called with. And I want to check that the last time that function was called, remember that on handle change function will be called on each keystroke. And this is simulating that. When a year ago, when I was trying to implement some tests for this function didn't exist. The username type a year and a half ago, to let us simulate text, user typing. Here, what we want to do is our function. If we look at our handle form input function that we have in app, I'm going to put here. We expect this function to be called with an ID and with a value. So here we can check that. We can check with what ID was called and with what value. So the ID that it must have been called with is, well, I typed in that name input box. So that must be the name input ID for the first argument. The second argument, it should be, once we type the last, letter, the last value will be Jon Snow. And we can do this. Okay, so our test still passing. We're checking that it was called, and then we can check that it was last call with name input and Jon Snow. If I have a spelling mistake here, that we can check, then it's going to tell me it expected Jon Snow but it got Jon Snow on the last time that function was called. Or no, it expected. Yeah, we expected to call this Jon Snow, but we actually called it with Jon Snow. Okay, so we saw two new things here: mock functions and simulating event user events with user event type. Questions about this? Anything I can clarify again? So for handle submit, we're just gonna do the same thing. In fact, you can see here that I didn't pass a handle submit. Well, we're not testing that. It's not gonna break if we don't pass it. In fact, we also just pass this. We just want to check that our elements, that our function was called whenever somebody typed in that input box. Now, typing in that input box is not updating the parent state because we don't have a parent state. We don't have app, or the form is not inside of app yet. So we can disregard the other props that don't have anything to do with that. Here we're just checking that if we type in that input box, our function, our listener function that is going to come from the parent eventually will be called, setting the state appropriately. If we want to test the other stuff, then we do the same thing here. For the name, this will be message input. And again, I have only to get the message input by the label text again. The label for the message, I think, is just message. This is the label for the message. So capital M, message. And then here we're going to type in the message input. We're going to type goodbye. And then we can expect our function to have been called and expect it to have been called last with the ID as we saw earlier. This is, in this case, our ID is message input. And the last value that it should have been called with is goodbye as a whole. And we are then testing for those two things, that whenever I input either or of the input boxes, that our function handle form input mock is being called. Now, one thing here is like this expectation or assertion is not really needed to be called, because this one is also implicitly checking if the function was called, checking if it was called last with some element. So here, actually, I'm gonna leave just one. I'm gonna remove this one. Just checking if it has been, to have been last called with is already implicitly checking if it was called in the first place. So we have that. Questions, thoughts? Okay, so I do have a question for you. How do we test the slider? What do you think? If you have to speculate, how do we move the slider to a specific value? Speculating.
Click.
Say that again. I didn't get who that was.
Maybe a click.
A click. A click on where? Like I click on this div.
Yeah.
But then we need a drag, right, to move it out. Right, and there is no drag, there is click, but there is no dragging the mouse or moving the mouse. Because again, we're not in a browser, we're in Node. So the way in which we can test this is slightly different. I think they're currently working on an API to do that. I was reading some of the issues in test event, I think here. Let's see if I can find it real quickly. So user event doesn't have a drag or anything like that. I think I had seen, let's see, drag, unclosed issue. Oh, I guess, no, this was drag and drop. I think this was, yeah, as you see, there's no support for those actions except for click and hold, test run on top of JS DOM. As a consequence, all elements have no width or height, making it impossible to handle mouse events correctly. You need to test these kind of things. You should stick with Selenium or Cypress. This is, again, more of the visual stuff that we will need to do without a real browser that we can automate them. But we can still do this one in the following way. So I talked about user event. There is a fire event. And I want us to understand the difference between user event and fire event. So in here in the documentation, there is this section, firing events, and they show you how to fire an event. So this is how you could fire an event. You get the element that you want, and then as the first argument, the second argument, you pass in a new mouse event for click. Unfortunately, we can't do the drag around. We're going to do these slightly different. We could also do fire event click. And what I wanted to say is that the user event, where did the user event go? This user event, all this type, the type and the click, under the hood, they're using fire event. Fire event is sort of built in. At some point, I think they're going to merge, and there's only going to be one, because this is all done by the same people. For instance, fire event doesn't have a type method. It's not easy to type with fire event. You have to do each letter individually. What user event type does is, under the hood, is calling fire event for each character. So, you can think of user event wrapping in the fire event functionality. So whenever you can't do something with user event, check the documentation for fire event. You will be able to do it. So here there is an example about a change event. Here, this one. Fire event that change, and then we can do something like passing the element here. They're not using screen, but for our case, it will be the screen.get element by label text, and they're looking at a regular expression. So they're looking for something that has a label text that says picture. This is, well, we can tell here that this is for a input that is to select a file to upload. And what we see here is here, let's take a look at here. When we have the fire event, we pass in the element in which we want to fire the event. In this case, they're just getting by text in the same line. We have been doing it separately. But here we will put the element that we want to fire the event in. And then they create an event, new mouse event, right? But a change event, there's no change event method that we can create. What we can do though is this: we can pass in an event object that has a target and that can have a value, that can have a prevent default, And that's what we're going to use. So take a look at the documentation for more of that, but that will look like this. Here we will need fire event. Oh, also fire event. Before we do that, fire event comes from this line here. Fire event, testing library React. Anything we can do with user event, we can do with fire event. Fire event just provides a nicer interface by saying type instead of having to do fire event key down for each single key. For the change event, what we will do is fire event dot change, and we're gonna pass in our slider. Here we need our slider. First of all, we need to get that slider. So let's do let slider. Does the slider have a label text? Let's take a look. Form input range. This is our slider. It has a label, amount to donate. If it doesn't have a label, it's almost impossible to get it. So let's put this as our label. So we have our slider. Wait, do I have a spelling mistake or something? Get by label text name, it's not a function. Label text. Oh, get by label text. Label text. Anybody see any issue? Label text.
I'll just try commenting it out.
Get by label text just got, oh, my dear friends, the spelling mistakes. Oh, I had an M here, and then that was ruining my screen input, our import. So let's do this. So, okay, so now it's passing, and we're changing the slider. We want to set the slider to be, let's say we want to change it to be $10. So what we can do is, and here's where we will pass in the event if it was a mouse event, but here we're going to pass an object that represents the event. We're going to say event.target. I'm going to say the value that I want to be set in there is going to be, actually, let's say 100. So this is going to be the event object. This is going to fire the change event on the slider, and this event object is going to be passed. The way in which we access the value is through the event target that value. This is what we're simulating here. We're passing an object that has a target, and it has a value. Then if our code is correct, our code will look at this value and save it to the state. In this case, we're not testing that functionality yet. In this case, we're just going to expect our function to have been called with that 100. Now let's make an assertion here. Let's say expect handle for an input mock to have been called last, call with the ID, as we said, and the value. The ID of our slider is amount input. The value is, let's make it fail first, 200 to make sure. So let's see if we get that 200. Oh, this is interesting. Oh no, okay, no. We get the expected amount to be 200. It received the amount input 100. I don't know why it's showing me this, but that was called 17 times. Our function has been called, our handle form input has been called 17 times, 8 times here, some other number of times here. Here, I think this only happens at once. But we see that our test is failing because it was expecting 200, but it got 100. So that tells us that our change event is being fired correctly. And then here we end up with expecting that our handle mock input, our handle form input mock has been called with the amount input as the ID and the value 100. As you can see, this is that function. This is the function we're mocking. This is the way. Sorry, not this. This is the function we're mocking. Our handle form input that comes through props. It's going to be called with the ID and with that value. So, questions?
How far do we have? I mean, you can test every single thing, and you will. I mean, the test would be longer than the actual website. Like, what's the limit of that?
That's a good question. Yeah, that is actually a possibility. That you write more tests, more coding tests, that actual code for your application. So there is no limit. There is no balance. I would say. I think if your application is very complex and it has a lot of functionality, very well end up being that you have more code to test all that functionality than code to produce the functionality, which will be your app. So yeah, you might end up with more code written in test than in actual functionality. Mm-hmm.
So you test everything that's kind of not static.
That's correct, basically. Yeah, and even the static stuff, like we could use snapshot testing for the static stuff as well, but those tests are much more simpler, much more shorter. But we can't see them today. Any final questions, thoughts?
So that fire event dot change, does that actually move things, or that just changes the value, like the DOM manipulation?
It doesn't. This fire change is literally just calling, invoking the event handler on change in the element and passing this as the event. So this is from here. This is the most synthetic thing that we can do. Like this is not as close to the user. The user, moves the mouse to the little circle and drags the mouse around. Since we're not in a browser, we can't really do that. This is the workaround that the testing library suggests as of now. I don't think. Yeah, they might implement it in the future, but as we saw in that issue, there is no width, so you don't know, like, drag the mouse by how much, basically. Yeah, so this is happening all at once, actually. So I think that is also part of your question. This will change the slider to 100, from 0 to 100. 0 to 100 real quick, as they say. There will not be values in the middle, like when the user is dragging and so on. Other questions? Okay. I think the last thing will be, so we have the value of the input is 100. What we expect is the state to have been updated and for this p tag here to also have 100. Well, actually, this part here we can't test just yet, because the way in which this will be tested is when the handle input change fires, sets the state in app, that state comes down, updating the p tag saying I got 500. So that's actual functionality that then we will need to test in app once we can test that state. And we'll need to do that another day. But this, as today we learn how to test for something that is appearing in the screen, checking that everything is there, that you have the right content, and we learn how to do a few events to simulate user interacting with our app, like typing, changing. Even though we didn't see click, you can go at the documentation and have a reference there. We also learn how to make a mock function to pass to our components to assess whether that function has been called or not. Final questions or thoughts? Okay. Feel free to reach out anytime. I'll say, even with this, even though we didn't get to test the more complex app, try to start thinking about where to add a few of this in your capstone projects. I think it can honestly set you apart as a candidate, saying, "Oh, I tested my capstone project. If I change something, I'll know if it runs or if it doesn't run." Yeah, I think it can really set you apart against other candidates. So because of that, highly encouraged. We actually, now that I think about it, for my cohort, we were not taught testing. We had to learn ourselves. And I'm glad that now I can get to show you what I learned, and that you can take advantage of that. So that is all. Everything is on the lesson that I'll say review it. I'm going to see if later on I can build some time for us to test the app as a whole. Make sure that if you didn't understand something that we did today, that you go and review the app yourself, and that you ask questions to try to get that clear. Because once we test app, everything is building on top of each other. Once we test app, we're not gonna, do we learn anything? I think once we are testing app, we're just learning putting together what we learned today, basically. There is nothing really special. We're going to get to submit the form, and expect a new donation to be in the donation list. Expect the input fields to have cleared out after you submit the form and stuff like that. So there's not going to be anything new, but it will build on top of this. As I said, that started app that I share with you here at the top has a branch called tested app that has all the tests, so you can look at the final version there. You go to React source components test. There are all the tests here. Is how it tested app, etc. So that is it, everyone. I hope this was helpful. I hope you were here with me. I didn't get to see a lot of your faces. The recording I'll upload to YouTube momentarily, but without further ado, I hope you have a good night. I want to ask the team if they have anything to add, any last minute announcement.
Just one announcement. I sent out some calendar invites to those of you, to some of you. Please look in your inbox tonight for those invites, and accept them if you can. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. Well, have a good night, everyone. I think I'm staying with one of you. Yeah. Everyone else, have a good night.
Good night. Good night.
a great night.
Right.
Chuck, give me 2 minutes. I'll be back.
Where did Leo go?
Did he ask you a question, Sorry?
Yeah, where did he go?
I'm not sure.
Class is over?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still here.
Okay.
All right.
Did anyone else manage to fix their testing issue?
Well, I wasn't really following along. Yeah.
I couldn't fix it.